Breaking right now on Morning News Now, shut down. The federal government now officially out of funding for the first time since 2018.
Reconsideration is not passed.
Senate lawmakers failing to pass two 11th-hour bills to keep the government open ahead of the midnight deadline, with Republicans and Democrats placing the blame on each other.
It's stunning. I cannot believe that Chuck Schumer has done this, really. You all know exactly why he's doing it, because he's worried about his own political future.
They've got to sit down and negotiate with Democrats to come to a bill that both parties can support.
Now, fear and uncertainty for hundreds of thousands of federal workers as President Trump warns of the consequences of a shutdown.
The last thing we want to do is shut it down, but a lot of good can come down from shutdowns. When you shut it down, you have to do layoffs, so we'd be laying off a lot of people.
Clearly a lot to get to this Wednesday morning. Good morning. Thanks for being here with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Joe Fryer. So let's get right to it. NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen has reaction from the White House. We're also going to talk about the impacts the shutdown could have on millions of Americans with travel expert Katie Nastro. But let's start with the latest on the impasse in Congress with Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona. Mel, good morning. So this is the first time the government shut down since 2018. That was a partial shutdown during the first Trump administration. This is a full government shutdown, and as you know, federal agencies are already functioning with reduced workforces thanks to cuts that were made under the DOGE era. Are we in new territory as far as what this shutdown is going to look like?
Yeah, good morning, guys. I've been a Capitol Hill reporter for almost 15 years. I've covered a couple of these shutdowns, and I would argue the stakes have never been higher. And primarily, that's because you have President Trump in the White House, who is threatening to make this as politically painful as possible for Democrats. You had the OMB director come out with a memo saying that they're going to institute mass firings for federal employees in the event of a shutdown. Some Democrats have said that was an intimidation tactic. They weren't sure that they were actually going to follow through. But Trump is making quite clear that he plans to indeed try to cut back on services, fire people. He even teased the idea of cutting benefits for people. So on top of what you already see during a shutdown, which is thousands of federal workers either being furloughed or being forced to work without pay, in addition to national parks closing, you're going to see the slowdown of some services. It's going to be an absolute mess, especially the longer that it drags on.
Mel, there were actually two last-ditch effort votes last night. Some lawmakers did actually end up breaking rank to vote with the opposing party. Tell us who that was and what ended up happening.
Yeah, so they had two votes yesterday in the Senate. They voted on the Democrats' version of a stopgap spending bill, which included a number of health care priorities, including extending the Obamacare subsidies. And then they had a vote once again on that House-passed 7-week stopgap spending bill. Both of those failed. But interestingly, on the House GOP plan, they actually picked up 3 Democratic senators. And the reason why that's important is because, at least in Republicans' views, this is a sign that the pressure is growing, that they potentially have an opportunity to pick up more Democrats as they keep having these votes, as the pressure continues to grow. They would need 8 Democrats total, but there's a number of senators who are in either tough races, who are in competitive battleground districts, or in some cases who are retiring. So those are sort of the targets for Republicans. But in the meantime, the two GOP leaders not meeting, not sitting down for talks. In fact, they even got into a little spat on the Senate floor yesterday. Let's watch that moment.
You cannot pass legislation in the Senate when it comes to appropriations unless it is bipartisan. So the leader will say it's clean. No, it's not clean because there was no discussion.
The Democrat leader and his colleagues have the same leverage on November the 21st. This is a short-term CR. This is what we do all the time around here, as witnessed by the chart that you're just using there. 24 pages long, funds of government till November the 21st, at which time you have the same leverage then that you have right now, and we have until the end of the year to fix the ACA credit issue. And we're happy, as I said yesterday and I've said on multiple occasions, to sit down with you to do that.
So the Senate will hold another vote on that GOP passed CR today. They will not be in session tomorrow because of the Jewish holiday. And then if the government still doesn't open, they'll be here Friday and potentially over the weekend as well.
Mel, obviously at this point, we just don't know how long this could go. But what seems the most obvious path to getting out of the shutdown?
I think the most likely path is that more Democrats, as I mentioned, ultimately fold and decide to give over the votes to pass this CR and to open the government. The other potential path here, and this is what Democrats are hopeful of, is that they see an opportunity to make a deal with President Trump over those Obamacare subsidies. The Democratic leaders who had a meeting with Trump in the White House said they believe Trump showed some level of concern when he learned that these expiring subsidies means that healthcare costs are going to skyrocket. They're trying to essentially put a wedge in between Trump and GOP leaders. But so far, they are all standing firm that Republicans do not want to negotiate health care until Democrats open the government first. So that's where we're at, guys, on day one of this government shutdown.
All right, Mel, thank you so much.
Well, now let's bring in Katie Nastro to explain how the shutdown could impact millions of people when it comes to their travel plans. She is a spokesperson for the travel site Going. Katie, good morning. I'm so excited. I'm about to kick off a couple days of travel. So this is really great news, and I'm really excited to hear from you. And as I think so many people are wondering right now, what does this mean when I go to an airport? The U.S. Travel Association estimates that our travel economy could actually end up losing $1 billion a week if the shutdown is not ending quickly. But let's start with, how would it affect the National Park Service and other federal tourist attractions?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. Look, based on the latest contingency plan, national parks are partially open as of now, but visitor centers and anywhere that needs personnel are going to be closed. And really, if this continues for weeks and weeks, this is really where we see national parks to shutter. And looking at the government shutdowns in the past, we saw our parks really start to deteriorate. Things like trash pickup, safety concerns start to mount as people will get into the parks and are not able to get medical attention if needed, as well as damages can occur. And already national parks are strained, operating with 24% less staff than they had in years past, based off of January numbers. So this is really could cause concern for travelers that are heading out in the weeks to come if this continues.
Katie, we have a recent survey revealing 60% of Americans said they would rethink, even cancel trips in the event of a government shutdown. The TSA, of course, is a government agency. So maybe not today, but down the road, what could this mean for our airports?
Yeah, Joe, great question. And again, essential services. So we're going to see flights take off and arrive. Now, as we get through this, if this continues, this is really where we can see morale start to deteriorate in the form of TSA workers and air traffic controllers who are already strained, showing up day after day. And this can really take a toll on people that are not getting a paycheck at the end of the week, if long story short. So this could then lead to staffing issues, call outs like we saw in 2019, which the longest shutdown in history actually caused some temporary airport shutdowns. Now, it is unlikely that will happen this week, potentially next week. But again, if this continues, this is really where travelers could incur some delays, not even in the form of the TSA lines, but also due to flights being delayed.
What about international travel? What kind of disruptions could we see there?
Yeah, along with flights being delayed due to air traffic controllers potentially calling out sick and whatnot, this is where if you are getting your passport processed, you have a new application, depending upon where you're processing it through, this could actually get delayed even further. So if you've any international travel coming up and you've already sent in your passport, this is where we might see that, 4 to 6 week timeline get extended and stretched like we saw during COVID, as well as, the one bright spot this year in comparison to recent years is the fact that you can actually get your renewal online, but there is that human element that needs to play into everything. So just expect delays there if this continues.
Ooh, the anxiety of a passport renewal only getting worse. Katie Nastro, thank you so much.
Let's bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen, who's covering the White House for us. John, first, you're going to act as our history professor here because President Trump was in his first term nearly 70 years ago during what did become the longest government shutdown in history. That was about 5 weeks. It was over the holidays back in 2018. Just walk us through what happened back then, how the Trump administration handled it that time.
There was a big fight at the time over funding President Trump's border wall. And President Trump brought Nancy Pelosi, then the leader of the Democratic Party in the House, into the White House, and they negotiated in public. And Pelosi basically got him to say, I own a shutdown. at which point he kind of owned the shutdown. A month later, they came to an agreement, got the government back open, 34 days.
All right, well, we'll see what happens this time. In other news, yesterday, this was kind of a big deal. The president announced a deal with drug maker Pfizer to voluntarily sell its medications at lower cost to Medicaid patients. So they're going to actually sell these drugs on a new direct-to-consumer website called Trump RX. Walk us through how this will work and why the White House is doing this now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to wait just a little bit to see exactly how it works. But American consumers are angry about drug prices, and not surprisingly, because they know that drug prices are cheaper overseas. What President Trump is doing here is something that many members of Congress agree with, would like to have been able to do themselves, but for political reasons have not been able to do, which is force drug makers to sell at a lower price here in the United States. And, you know, he's so confident that it's going to work, he's put his name on it.
John, we also want to ask you about a court case that's making some headlines here. The Trump administration's attempted crackdown on free speech, heavily criticized by a federal judge in Massachusetts. This judge was a Reagan appointee, ruled foreign students have the same free speech protections under the First Amendment as U.S. citizens. It's getting a lot of attention in legal circles for what it says and perhaps most importantly, how it says it. So what should we know about this ruling and what comes next?
Well, look, I think there's a big philosophical divide here between the President of the United States and many other people who look at the First Amendment to the Constitution and really the sort of concept of America. It is difficult, on the one hand, to say that the United States is a beacon of freedom for people around the world, and then say if people come here from around the world, they're not allowed to say what they think. You know, the First Amendment is at the core of our democracy or a republic, you know, whichever sort of part of that balance you want to talk about. And it dates back to our founding and before our founding, and the frustration that the British had for so many years with their inability to speak about the king.
Lots of history this morning, recent and distant, from John Allen. John, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Well, in front of a packed audience of the U.S. military's top brass from around the world, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth unveiled controversial cultural and standards changes within the armed services. Hegseth announced new directives for the military, including new physical fitness standards, while also attacking DEI initiatives within the armed forces. He spoke before the president, who then suggested major U.S. cities could be training grounds for the military. NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kuby has more.
The topic was shrouded in secrecy beforehand, and security was tight. Some of the nation's most senior military leaders ordered to board buses at 3:30 a.m. and then wait hours for the event to begin, according to defense officials.
This speech today is about people, and it's about culture.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth telling generals and admirals who'd flown in from all over the world to get on board with a series of changes.
But if the words I'm speaking today are making your heart sink, then you should do the honorable thing and resign.
The new standards include new grooming rules that prohibit beards and a requirement that everyone in combat roles must meet the highest male standard for physical fitness, a change that could impact women in uniform.
If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it.
He also plans to overhaul equal opportunity programs and the role of the Inspector General at a time when the Secretary himself awaits the release of an IG review on whether he shared sensitive information on Signal, an unclassified server, an accusation Hegseth denies. New recruits could also see changes, lifting restrictions on how far drill instructors can go.
They can swear, and yes, they can put their hands on recruits. This does not mean they can be reckless or violate the law, but they can use tried and true methods to motivate new recruits.
Retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling is concerned about the impact all of it may have on troops.
To hear the kinds of things that came out of the Secretary's mouth shows that he doesn't really respect them as contributors to the combat arms or fighting our nation's wars.
President Trump endorsing Hegseth's speech and repeating his ultimatum.
If you don't like what I'm saying, you can leave the room. Of course, there goes your rank, there goes your future.
In the president's remarks, which were highly political, he also defended the use of troops in American cities.
And I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military.
The military leaders in the auditorium showed little reaction to the remarks, politely clapping at the end of each speech. As officers in uniform, they are prohibited from endorsing political comments.
All right, Courtney, thank you.
Time now for weather. Hurricanes Imelda and Umberto left their marks on the Atlantic coast yesterday. Heavy winds whipped up strong surf on North Carolina's Outer Banks, causing some abandoned beachfront homes to collapse into the ocean.
Let's check in with NBC meteorologist Angie Lassman for the latest on these. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning, too. Some pretty incredible video yesterday from these systems that are churning just off the coast. They're continuing to move away, but not before, of course, they're continuing those impacts along the coast today as well. You can see wave heights near, of course, the center of those 20, 30 feet in some locations, but those large swells still going to be with us today and tomorrow along the eastern coast of the United States. That means we've got some coastal flooding concerns. There's some advisories, some watches, some warnings up and down the coast. And on top of that, rip currents and hazardous surf are going to last. That goes into this weekend, so a heads up for folks that are heading to the coast there. Meanwhile, more direct impacts are expected in Bermuda from Hurricane Imelda as it intensifies to a Category 2 down the line. We're talking late tonight into tomorrow. That's when we'll see the worst of those conditions. Right now, the center of that system at least looks to be close to 10, 15, 20 or so miles from the island. So, of course, we've got hurricane warnings in effect for folks there as they gear up for those hurricane force winds near 100. As well as the storm surge, the damaging waves, and on top of that, concerned about some flooding when we add up the rainfall totals that could be anywhere from 2 to 4 inches as we get through the next 24 to 36 hours. Beyond the tropics, we've got some chilly air kind of in place across parts of New England. So notice the advisories, some frost advisories, some freeze watches, some freeze warnings for folks across this region, waking up into the 20s, 30s, and a couple of spots into those low 40s. We'll see temperatures kind of moderate out as we get into the afternoon hours, but might want an extra layer this morning. Otherwise, most of the country is running way above normal. So we've got 85 degrees in Kansas City, feeling like summertime still in Minneapolis, and stretching down through the southern plains. It's 90s on tap for Houston, Lubbock, near 90 for Little Rock. And it's not just today. That continues, that same trend of above normal temperatures across most of this region as we get into tomorrow, too. You can see upper 70s and 80s across the Midwest and the plains, and then mid-90s for our friends in Austin. And if you're hoping for the short sleeve weather to continue into the weekend, you're in luck. We'll keep the upper 70s Saturday and Sunday in Philadelphia for any weekend plans. We've got low 80s in Lexington. St. Louis tops out at 88 degrees on Friday. I think it's, feeling a little bit more like summer than October 1st, guys, but we'll hold on to it because, as we know, winter comes at us fast, doesn't it? So
does.
80s it is for most folks across that region.
I have my college reunion this weekend, and in the past, anytime I go, I've been wearing like a sweatshirt, jackets, and I have to find a T-shirt now because I don't have one for my school.
Not so much. October in Chicago is normally much chillier.
Give me the 80s.
Yeah.
I'll take it. All right, thanks, Angie.
Thank you. All right, well, rap mogul Sean Diddy Combs is set to be sentenced this Friday after he was convicted on prostitution-related charges over the summer. Well, now on the eve of sentencing, prosecutors are asking a judge to send him to prison for more than a decade, but Combs' legal team is asking for just 14 months. NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas has the details.
Prosecutors asking a judge to sentence Sean Diddy Combs to more than 11 years in federal prison, arguing he engaged in violence and put others in fear. A stark contrast to Combs' legal team, who are seeking 14 months, which would see him walk free in a matter of weeks, as he's already served 13 months in prison.
Look for the judge to land somewhere in the middle, split the difference, a sentence of maybe 4 to 6 years.
Combs was convicted on prostitution charges over the summer, but acquitted of sex trafficking and racketeering, which carried up to a life sentence in prison. A source familiar with Combs' strategy telling NBC News that the mogul plans to address the court himself during.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.